And then the property crimes, burglary, larceny, vehicle theft, and arson. So I'll quickly step through these, and the subsequent slides will have more detail about these crimes. First, as we know, there were 120 murders in the city of St. Louis last year. That was up from 113 in the previous 2 years. I always believe, and I've said this before, context is always important. Homicides in the city of St. Louis on a 5-year trend, the previous 5 years were at 136. Still continue to trend below that. I'm not happy at 127. I'm not happy at 113. I think every police chief wants to see 0, and we can talk a little bit about strategies that we're going to implement in 2014 to continue to push violent crime down. Rape is the category that has received some attention. That number, if you notice, it's footnoted. The FBI changed the definition of rape that is counted in that category last January. The department sent out press releases, did a lot of informational media on it so the community would understand. That category now is a much broader category. It captures victims that were reported in other areas. The primary difference is previously rape had to be a male and a female. Now same-sex is recorded in this category. We did an analysis of race from, if we applied the same coding rules that we were required to in 2013, 2012, we saw a decrease of 2 incidents, so there are no increases, patterns, or trends that are concerning to me that we're not looking at, but what I am always concerned about is victimization in that category. We do a lot with advocate groups. We have advocates embedded in the police department to work with women, to work with victims to try and further reduce that category. The rest of the categories I'll go through quickly. As you can see, all the remaining categories are down. And that's because of the hard work of the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department. Go to the next slide. Simply, if there are any questions, this is the press release that was issued last January that talked about the FBI's change in uniform crime reporting, the definition of rape, and so we've been on top of that, doing it exactly the way that the FBI expects us to do it, and every city around the country that participates in the UCR, Uniform Crime Reporting Program. The next slide is the comparison of crime in the city. Down, as I said, 5.4. The red bar shows total crime decrease. The gold bar is property crime, 4.2%, and then the violence in the city of St. Louis was down 10%, or almost 600 fewer victims of violence in the city of St. Louis. The next slide, again, I always talk about context. We go back to 2006, which in the last 10-year period was the peak of violence in the city of St. Louis. That's why we go back to 2006. It was the peak year. We see that the city has experienced in total crime, the red box, 47% decrease. In property crime, we've seen a 48% decrease. And in violence, we've seen a 41% decrease since 2006. So again, the city of St. Louis, from where it was in 2006, has become a safer place. But we always look at, the city, as you know, is divided into 3 areas and will continue to be divided into 3 areas. A North Patrol, a Central Patrol, and a South Patrol. We've seen crime reductions in all of the areas. I will challenge, as we redistrict, and we'll talk about redistricting at the end of this, I will challenge our commanders to push those decreases even greater, to identify the systemic causes, the root causes of those crimes, and address them at every level we can, including enforcement, sentencing, social services, community partners. As you know, I'm a big supporter of the neighborhood ownership model to get the community involved at every level, so I will continue to do that. But again, across the city, every part of the city saw reductions in every category. Homicides, the murders, continue to plague the city, and we focus on the violence. As we focus on that, this is a 10-year look back at the distribution of homicides throughout the city. The red bar is North Patrol, the gold bar is Central, and South is the blue at the bottom. Doesn't really tell us anything except that at a quick glance we can see that the preponderance of violence is in the northern part of the city around homicides and murders. This is, the blue line represents homicides. The blue line represents the 5-year average. The green line represents the 2013 number. As you can see, in most months we trended below. We saw a spike in December. There were 10 more murders in December than the 5-year average. If I had to look for a root cause and systemic cause, it's the same thing that I've said repeatedly. To the violence, quite often there's a nexus back to drugs, back to disputes over drugs. minimize. I am always careful when I talk about victimization. I never want to minimize that. There were innocent people that were, the last week of December, an innocent woman sitting in her apartment afternoon, and an errant round came through her window and killed her from an assault rifle. That woman was in no way involved in any criminal activity at all. The two people outside, however, were, and were the one that was shooting was involved in criminal activity and did have a history back to narcotics. So again, when I talk about that, that's the nexus to the violence. The 51-year-old woman was not involved. She was a victim because others were. Next slide. Robberies citywide. In December, there were 57 fewer than the 5-year average. Continue to see that trend all over. We'll just move through these quickly. Aggravated assaults, there were 22 fewer in December than the 5-year average. This is an interesting category. We've seen, this is 12 compared to 13, that we've seen a reduction in violence with firearms of about 10%. We've seen a reduction in knives of about 18%. And other weapons can range from rocks to vehicles, everything except hands, fists, and feet, which remain relatively flat. So in that reduction, we have seen fewer weapons, fewer knives. It's spread out equally. Again, but the preponderance of that category is driven by gun violence. Burglaries citywide, looking at the 5-year average compared to last year, 202 fewer burglaries in December, spread throughout the city. Larcenies, 340 fewer in December than the 5-year average. So we continue to see those categories moving in the right direction. Larcenies, when we talk about all of those other categories, there are many subcategories inside of them. So I broke down the larceny category to look at the 4 of the most common. So our reduction in shoplifting, and that is because of a lot of work that was done, and I'll give the 3rd District credit. A lot of work was done with individual businesses to employ security officers, to come up with better internal theft prevention, to try and keep those from happening. So this is an example of where the police department has asked the private sector to step up and help reduce crime in the city, and we've seen some significant results, especially in the 3rd District. Larcenies from motor vehicles are in those categories as car bodies, and these are the ones that receive a lot of attention on the news media. Despite all of the attention and the hoopla, as you can see, 74 additional incidents spread out over a 12-month period. Not minimizing it, but just to put it in perspective. The overall category is down, but that particular portion of the category saw 74 additional incidents. Motor vehicle parts and from buildings make up additional parts in that category. From a motor vehicle, maybe tires, maybe a catalytic converter, maybe a battery. We did see an increase in battery thefts